Hello once again from the Charlottetown waterfront in my fabulous F-150 recording studio here. It's a Sunday morning. It's 1 degree. It's absolutely beautiful on the island. If you're not here, you need to get here soon. Our last podcast covered first-time home buyers, and one of the things that we touched on just briefly, because we try to keep things under 15 minutes, is the process of buying. We left it with setting up a search, understanding what you're looking for. In this podcast, we're going to cover making an offer. So we're going to jump right ahead to you found the perfect place. You're all excited. Now you need to make an offer. I think the first thing to establish is, what is the market like? Is it a buyer's market, seller's market? Is it a balanced market? And then you go from there to doing a lot of due diligence on the property you're looking to offer on. You're going to make sure that, if it's on for $175,000, they didn't pay $32,000 for it last week. You want to find out all kinds of stuff about it so you are not going into this absolutely blind. I'm Michael Posnick, and today I have Patty Campbell, Powerhouse Patty, with me to my right.
Thank you, Michael. Nice to be here today on this beautiful day.
That's it?
Yeah.
So when you're making an offer, what do we need to see on that offer? Do you want me to give the list or to you?
No, you go right ahead.
We're making an offer. We would sit down with your agent, or we do this over the phone, because forms can now in Prince Edward Island be signed electronically, like many places, using .loop, DocuSign, or whatever. Obviously, we're looking for the purchase price. We're looking for the deposit. The deposit's not to be confused with the down payment. The down payment's a requirement of the lender if you're not buying cash, which most people aren't. The deposit is a good faith money or monies that basically binds the contract. You do need a deposit, otherwise that contract is not legally bound.
But the deposit can be considered part of your down payment from a bank standpoint. So as an example, if you put a $2,000 deposit down and you need a $10,000 down payment on the property, that $2,000, you now only have to provide $8,000. So
absolutely.
Okay.
So the deposits in PEI are usually pretty minuscule compared to most. The average in North America is probably 5%. If you're, if you want to make a reasonable down payment, even 10% or more, and that can also be used as a leverage tool, because bigger deposits make it look like you're more serious, even though they don't really affect the end result per se. Typical deposits in PEI seem to be falling in that limits for the ETF transfers, which is usually under $2,500, $3,000. Are you finding that?
Yeah, that's about what I find.
Right. So you've got the offer price, you have the deposit. The down payment has nothing to do with it. That's a function of the mortgage, which you should already have together and discussed with your lender. Conditions will include when you're going to take possession of that house, the closing date. The closing date, in my opinion, should never be a Friday. It should be a Monday through Thursday, and you should try to avoid the end of the month or the beginning of the month.
Why is that, Michael?
Because it's bad news, because people typically try to close on the 30th, 31st, or the 1st. A lot of times because they're renting and they want to try to tie everything in, but even if you're renting, things may or may not close on time, and if it's the summertime, a lot of the legal offices and that seem to vacate on a Friday afternoon.
4 o'clock.
To go golfing or whatever lawyers do, and the agents. So
And then if it closes on a Friday, or if it was the closing date's a Friday, I do not pick a Friday closing unless I know it is somebody that is not going to be homeless, because you're not just out one night. You are now out 3 nights waiting until Monday morning rolls around to complete that sale closing, hopefully. So
right, because the banks are now closed, and if there's anything wrong, you move in and you find out that there's a plumbing issue or electrical issue. Those tradespeople are less inclined to be working on a Friday night than a Monday morning. A lot can go wrong. Close between Monday and Thursday. Stay away from the ends and the beginnings of the month. You're also going to indicate what you want with the property. This needs to be spelt out, whether it's fridge, stove, washer, dryer. We've included lawnmowers. We're not typically in the appliance and lawnmower business, but it's typical that you do see some smaller items included. I do note that with those items, I feel and I'll get your opinion, get some pictures of them, specifically lawnmowers, because we've had people switch out lawnmowers. Get a picture of the serial number, the hours on the lawnmower, if it's a commercial lawnmower, make, model, fridges, stove. Take lots of pictures. It costs nothing these days on your phone. And just have that on hand. You're going to write that in the offer. You're also going to make this conditional on financing, because even though the bank has said you're good to go, they're still going to want an appraisal done. That appraisal has to come in and align with what you bought the property for. You're typically going to have a home inspection done there. I suggest not using a family member, cousin, uncle, brother, friend. Use a real home inspector. Your agent can supply typically 3 or more that you can pick from, because that's someone that does this every day. They know what to look for. And they certainly have a lot more expertise than someone that's never built a house or done anything with housing.
And a good real estate professional will make sure that the home inspector kind of aligns with the client. You know, you don't want a home inspector that may be very, very technical speaking to a first-time home buyer, because it's going to overwhelm them. Vice versa, you don't want a very seasoned, purchaser having a home inspector who speaks very, basic, simple terms, because that will only frustrate them. They want all the mechanics of the home. So a good real estate professional will make sure that you get a home inspector that aligns with you and will be able to articulate and convey to you in a way that they know will not stress or overwhelm, but definitely protect the buyer.
Right. Other clauses you'll typically see is the insurance clause, to make sure you can get insurance, because that's typically going to be a condition of the mortgage. Insurance problems usually aren't that considerable in PEI unless you've got wood-burning appliances, wood stoves, exposed foam that combust and kill you in a matter of seconds in the basement.
Yeah, an insurance thing, if you don't pick a local insurance company or an insurance company within the province, and you pick, say, nothing against the bank's insurance companies, but if they're getting you to do just something to be aware of, if they're getting you to fill out, all the, what's the distance to a fire hydrant and, all of this information, if an I is not dotted or a T is not crossed, when the day comes that hopefully it doesn't happen, but you end up having to make a claim, they could reject you. So I typically, especially a first-time home buyer, I usually try steering them to a local insurance company who's going to go out and assess the property themselves and fill out the paperwork.
And they know the market, and that goes for mortgage people too. It's always good to deal with someone that knows the local market. Someone in Toronto probably doesn't know anything about buying a house in O'Leary. Other conditions, water tests. If you're outside the major cities and you're not in some sort of communal, municipal water situation, which is for the most part any house that's in the country, you're going to get water. The vendor's going to do the water tests for you, both bacteria and chemical. Septic system. Well, septic system inspections are kind of a joke here, because they're not really inspecting the system per se, the tile bed and everything. They're just opening the lid to the tank and making sure the liquid's at a certain level, the tank's not cracked, and there's nothing obvious, like the thing isn't on a 30-degree angle, but that is another clause. And if you are not an island resident, you'll go through Island Regulatory Appeals Commission if you're buying over 165 feet of water frontage or 5 acres. If you're a non-Canadian resident, you'll also be subject to Justin Trudeau's, what would you call it, his dictatorship policies, where you can't buy in certain areas if you're not a Canadian resident. That has affected PEI. It shouldn't have, because we never had any issues, but the same rules that have applied in British Columbia are now applying here.
Yeah, and I mean, just with regards to that, Prince Edward Island being, again, another unique market, we're, the smallest province in Canada, we already have land protection acts in place. We didn't need another layer of limitations, because the Island Regulatory Appeals Commission, they already do all their screening, and, if the land is over 5 acres or 165 feet, but that's a whole other podcast, possibly, but we already have our Land Protection Act. We didn't need a secondary level, for sure.
Yes, but thankfully that's going away. Is it next year?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so there is mapping. It's done by Census Canada, or Canadian Census, but it's kind of weird.
Yeah. We have one more year of it. It's 2023.
Yeah, I know.
2022.
So we said next year. So that's it in a nutshell. When you make your offer, again, you're going to be familiar with market conditions. Hopefully, you're not going to get into a multiple offer situation. That's far more likely if you're a first-time home buyer or if you're looking for entry-level properties, because there's going to be a long list of buyers looking for properties that are 200,000-300,000, and they're just looking for a property for $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And people that don't have the financial capability for that. Your agent, if they're experienced, if they're full-time, if they're doing this every day, should know what they need to do to, number one, negotiate the best deal for you because they represent you, because hopefully you're not dealing with them as a listing agent as well.
Well, another question, just with regards to that, if you're a purchaser and just the lingo, ask for a reverse CMA. So the listing agent would have done their comparative market analysis to advise the seller, here's what the market says your property's worth. But sometimes a seller will pick their own price, or an agent will buy the listing and give them an inflated price. So as a buyer, you want your buyer's agent or representative to do what we call a reverse CMA to let you know, does the number that's currently on the property align with what, the market value should be? That is something more of interest if you're in a buyer's market. If you're in a seller's market, it doesn't matter typically. You can still do one, but a lot of times the seller's going to get what the seller wants for the property. So,
and it comes down to your due diligence, hopefully knowing the situation, if you can find out what predicament or why the seller is selling. If the seller is just selling because they're looking for an idiot because they bought it for $400,000, now they're on for $950,000 6 months later, they're not motivated to sell. But if someone from Southern Ontario comes in here and cuts them a big check, they're more than happy to take their money, build something brand new for half the price, and move on with their day and sell it to another one. That's what's been happening here. So you really need to be careful, because in my opinion, if someone paid $550,000 for a house 18 months ago, I don't care about what the over-amorous Ontario buyers are buying for $1.2 million. I'm not paying that, because markets go up and down. Housing goes up and down. We've proven that in the crashes recently.
And we just find Ontario buyers, because they're not properly educated. Both of us are actually from Ontario originally, living here on Prince Edward Island, but we find they're not properly being educated and informed in the Maritimes, just using the Maritimes as a whole, and are assuming what seems like a steal of a deal here. They're ready to write the check, not realizing they probably paid $100,000 or
$400,000
more than what, as a local, we know it's to be worth. So anyways, just a perfect opportunity to slide that in.
It's what it is it's like shell shock. You come here, when I first came here, just over 25 years ago, you'd see a waterfront home for $40,000, and you're like, I need to buy this, $40,000. Holy smokes, I just sold my house in North Hamilton for $40,000, and now I can live on the water for $40,000 in PEI. You're just ready to cut a check, not knowing full well that property is more than waterfront. It's actually on the water, ready to float away, and there's a reason why it's $40,000. But more appropriate to today, what you're seeing is people that have bought properties that have doubled the price, and they don't really care if they sell, and hopefully you don't want to be the victim buying that property only to find out it's going to go down in price as we lose the demand. Because real estate, just like anything else, is supply and demand, and some people forget that, and that's what caused the crash in the States, was people thought housing went up forever. Not always the situation. So that's about all we can cover in 14 minutes. Do you have anything to add before we go away?
No, that's pretty much the process, and yeah, I think we covered it.
Get a copy of the forms before you make an offer preemptively. It gives you an opportunity to review them, read them, and be a little more familiar with them rather than just being popped out in spur of the moment.
Yeah. Well, I find when they just get popped out, all a buyer is focused on is, what am I offering and when's the closing? Whereas there's a lot more to these contracts that you need to be aware of.
Right on. And you can always have your lawyer review them too.
Absolutely.
Prior to signing. Have a good day.
Have a good day.